Something unusual is happening at the top of the Israeli government, and it is generating more questions than answers. Benjamin Netanyahu was absent from an emergency security cabinet meeting convened specifically to discuss Iran's military response at one of the most critical moments of this conflict. The meeting proceeded without him. Defense Minister Minister Katz formally declared the Prime Minister absent and took control of the session. This was not a routine briefing. This was the War Cabinet meeting where Israel's response to the most intensive Iranian strikes of the conflict was being planned, and the man who initiated this war was not in the room. That absence was confirmed not by Iranian state media, not by opposition politicians, but by the Times of Israel. Israeli media, with direct knowledge of security cabinet protocols, reported that what occurred was historically anomalous. The Prime Minister of Israel does not miss security cabinet sessions during active military conflict. The protocol exists precisely because these moments are when the country's leadership must be present, visible, and in command. Subscribe to Froome Report right now and turn on notifications. What is being documented here is developing in real time, and the implications for the Israeli chain of command, for the trajectory of this conflict, and for the markets that are pricing in every signal about who is actually making decisions in Tel Aviv, require the kind of analysis that connects the documented facts rather than simply transmitting the official version. Before going further, it is necessary to establish clearly what is confirmed and what remains in the analytical category of open questions, because in a conflict this volatile, the distance between those two categories is where misinformation travels fastest. What is confirmed? Netanyahu did not attend the Security Cabinet meeting. He was formally declared absent. The defense minister chaired the session in his place. Israeli media reported this. No official explanation for the absence was provided at the time. What is contested? The reason for that absence. Iranian state media and IRGC-aligned channels moved quickly after the absence became known to construct a narrative suggesting a significant strike had targeted Israeli leadership. Pakistani media outlets, including the Express Tribune, reported that a drone attack had been more consequential than Israel was prepared to publicly acknowledge. Chinese, Russian, and Turkish media carried similar reporting. Western outlets have stated that Netanyahu is alive and that his absence had an unspecified operational explanation. What is documented but unexplained? An Indian journalist working for a major outlet was arrested, confirmed by Gulf media and corroborated by multiple regional sources, following a live broadcast in which he appeared to be transmitting from a location where Netanyahu was physically present. The journalist reportedly identified the Prime Minister on camera during a live transmission. Shortly afterward, a strike was reported in the area. The journalist was arrested on grounds of exposing Israeli national security. If the arrest reflects what the official justification states, it means Netanyahu was at a specific sensitive location whose coordinates were effectively disclosed in real time. The arrest itself is confirmed. The operational sequence connecting that disclosure to what followed is the subject of competing accounts that this analysis cannot resolve with available evidence. What can be stated analytically? A head of state who is genuinely well, fully operational, and in command of a country at the most dangerous moment of its most significant military conflict in decades does not allow 48 hours to pass without a credible, documented public appearance. Netanyahu is a politician who has consistently sought the camera during every previous military confrontation. The 12-day war, the Gaza operations, every prior security crisis produced immediate, repeated, high-visibility public appearances in which he projected command, decisiveness, and personal control. His consistent behavior in every prior crisis makes his absence in this one analytically significant regardless of what ultimately explains it. The Israeli government's response to the questions surrounding his whereabouts came in the form of video footage. First, a brief appearance behind a curtain in an undisclosed location, then a subsequent clip that appears to show him in a cafe setting. Both videos immediately generated intense scrutiny. Independent fact-checkers, including PolitiFact and Grok on the X platform, were compelled to address questions about visual anomalies that spread rapidly across social media. Apparent inconsistencies in the footage that multiple observers flagged as potentially indicating manipulation. Official accounts attributed these anomalies to optical illusions and compression artifacts. The fact-checkers concluded the footage was genuine. The analytical question worth asking is not whether any specific visual anomaly proves manipulation. It is why, at the most critical moment of an active war, the leader of one of the world's most sophisticated military states is communicating his status to the public through cafe footage rather than standing in front of a camera in a secure facility delivering a direct address. Netanyahu has never previously communicated through informal setting footage during a security crisis. He has always chosen the press conference, the podium, the war room backdrop, settings that project authority and command. The departure from that consistent pattern, regardless of what explains it, is itself an analytical data point. While the questions around Netanyahu's status were circulating, the conflict itself was escalating to a new threshold. The IRGC confirmed the launch of what it designated the 54th wave of Operation True Promise 4. And this wave was categorically different from previous ones in a specific way. For the first time in this conflict, Iran deployed ultra-heavy missiles against what it described as Israeli decision-making centers. The systems used included K-bar-Shekin missiles armed with 2-ton warheads, the heaviest conventional warhead in Iran's arsenal, alongside the Sejil solid-fuel strategic missile, which was confirmed in combat deployment for the first time during this operation. The Sejil represents a significant escalation in capability beyond what Iran has previously committed in this conflict. Unlike the liquid-fueled systems that have comprised the majority of previous waves, a solid-fuel missile requires no fueling preparation time before launch. It can be fired within minutes of the launch decision. There is no exposure window for satellite detection of fueling operations. It is faster to deploy, harder to detect in pre-launch preparation, and capable of ranges that cover every American and Israeli military installation in the region. Its confirmed combat deployment signals a deliberate decision by Iranian commanders to commit a higher tier of strategic capability than previously used. The targeting of decision-making centers, command infrastructure, military coordination facilities, intelligence installations, rather than purely military hardware, represents the same blinding logic that this channel has been tracking since the New York Times satellite imagery confirmed systematic strikes against radar infrastructure across the Gulf. The objective is not destroying assets. It is degrading the organizational capacity that allows assets to be effectively employed. Simultaneously, Hezbollah launched coordinated attacks from southern Lebanon. Israeli military sources cited by Israeli press described the level of command, control, and synchronization demonstrated in the Hezbollah component as inconsistent with the characterization of Hezbollah as a degraded and weakened force that Israeli government communications had been presenting for months. What those Israeli analysts described was not a militia operating beyond its capacity. It was an organization demonstrating high-level operational coherence, timing its strikes to coincide with the Iranian wave, hitting targets that maximized the stress on Israeli defensive systems already saturated by the primary Iranian assault. The narrative that Hezbollah had been effectively neutralized by sustained Israeli bombing campaigns, that its command and control had been disrupted beyond meaningful function, that its capacity to coordinate large-scale operations had been permanently reduced, that narrative did not survive the night of March 14th. The strategic logic of deploying ultra-heavy missiles against decision-making infrastructure, coordinated simultaneously with a Hezbollah attack from the north, is worth examining precisely because it represents a qualitative shift in the conflict's operational character. When you target a country's military hardware, you degrade its capacity to fight. When you target the infrastructure through which military decisions are made, transmitted, and coordinated, the command centers, the communications relays, the intelligence processing facilities, you degrade the organizational coherence that determines how effectively that hardware is employed. Iran has been executing both tracks simultaneously, but the confirmed deployment of the sigil and the explicit designation of decision-making centers as targets suggests the second track is now being elevated in priority. The combination of that targeting logic with the questions surrounding Netanyahu's whereabouts creates an analytical context that defense planners and intelligence agencies will be examining carefully. Leadership targeting during active conflict is not a novel concept. Every military doctrine addresses it. The specific question of whether Iran has the real-time intelligence capability to target Israeli leadership during active operations, and whether the Indian journalist's live broadcast represented a vector through which that targeting information could have been developed, is a question that the arrest of that journalist, confirmed by multiple regional media sources, indicates Israeli security services took seriously enough to act on immediately. The economic dimension of what is happening deserves direct attention because it reaches every person watching this analysis, regardless of their proximity to the conflict. Israel's war is currently costing its economy approximately $3 billion per week in direct losses: military operations, civilian disruption, business closures, lost commerce. Preliminary estimates suggest the American side of this conflict is running at approximately $1 billion per day in direct costs. Combined, that is approximately $10 billion per week being consumed by this conflict, and neither side has publicly stated what conditions would bring it to an end. The Brent crude price chart froze. For approximately 2 days, the public-facing oil price data stopped updating in real time, an anomaly that anyone monitoring energy markets noticed. Oil pricing data does not freeze because markets close for the night. The crude market is continuous. A freeze in the publicly displayed price data during an active military conflict that has closed the Strait of Hormuz, destroyed a major airport, struck Gulf energy infrastructure, and eliminated commercial shipping from the region's primary waterway is not a technical glitch. It is a signal that something in the energy market information architecture was being managed in a way that the normal public data flow was not able to accommodate. Israel's emergency state declaration has been extended through the end of March. That extension means the legal framework of exceptional powers, reduced civilian oversight, expanded executive authority, justification for decisions that would otherwise require public accountability, is going to remain in place for months. Emergency state declarations in active conflicts consistently serve dual purposes: genuine security necessity and political insulation from scrutiny. The polls inside Israel show sharply rising opposition to Netanyahu's management of the conflict. Extending the state of emergency means continuing to operate in a framework where that opposition has fewer institutional mechanisms to express itself consequentially. The civilian dimension of this conflict is the part that every military analysis tends to systematically underweight. and it is the part that will determine the long-term political trajectory of this region more decisively than any battlefield outcome. Israeli civilians have spent the better part of 3 weeks moving between their homes and bomb shelters. Schools are closed. Businesses are closed. The economy is not simply losing revenue, it is losing the basic rhythm of ordinary life that makes sustained productive activity possible. People who live under sustained missile threat, who cannot send their children to school, who cannot maintain employment, who cannot access the country's only international airport, those people do not simply absorb the disruption and wait. They make decisions, they relocate, they reassess whether the place they are living is a place they can continue to live. The northern border communities are the most acute example of this dynamic. The Israeli army has issued explicit orders prohibiting soldiers from patrolling certain areas near the Lebanese border because it cannot guarantee their security against Hezbollah anti-tank missile capability. When the most technologically sophisticated military in the region tells its own soldiers not to patrol certain areas because it cannot protect them there, that is not a description of territorial control. The objective that Hezbollah has stated explicitly, making the occupied northern communities uninhabitable, not through invasion but through the sustained impossibility of normal life, is being achieved incrementally, not because Hezbollah has occupied Israeli territory, but because the psychological and practical cost of remaining there is accumulating faster than any military operation can reverse it. The deterrence framework that Israel's security strategy has rested on for decades operated on the premise that Israeli military capability was so overwhelming, and Israeli willingness to use it so unquestioned, that adversaries would calculate the cost of attacking as prohibitive. That framework required adversaries to believe both that